Hello and welcome to episode 34 of the Herald's Horn. Today on the episode, Dan and I are just conquering a range of different topics. We have some events to talk about. We talk about the ban list update from Duel Commander a little bit. Interesting format. And we also have to talk about Morrow claiming that Universes Beyond nails every single metric that they care about. How could we not? After the break, then, I am joined by Dan Sheehan, host of the Pie Break podcast, author, comedian, the guy who's totally not a wolf, you know, all that kind of stuff. Former host of the Commander Sphere podcast, along with Rachel Weeks. We have a bit of a different conversation this week. We're not exactly talking about Magic the Gathering. We are two people who love to make things, talking about some of the highs and lows and making things, especially in our current media environment. It was a great conversation. I loved it. I hope you'll love it too. Speaking of loving things, if you love this show, I would love it if you would consider supporting us on Patreon. We've got some exclusive content. I'll send you a sticker in the mail. I just ordered some Herald's Horns that I'm going to sign and send out to higher tier patrons. We have a Discord that is slowly building up in community. I'm having a great time in there. You can find the link in the podcast description. I'm basically only ever going to ask this once. I haven't asked anyone for this in like 6 months on the podcast, but now that I am focusing more and more on the show and taking it more and more seriously, I would love it if you would consider subscribing or following on whatever platform you are on, especially if you are watching on YouTube. The race to 1,000 subscribers really opens up some more monetization opportunities and that kind of stuff for me. So if you are watching and you enjoying the show, I would love it if you would consider that as well. Thank you so much. Let's get into the episode. Hello, it's time for the Herald's Horn, part of the One Shot Network. My name is Cal Jones, and like always, today I am joined by the wonderful Dan. Say hello, Dan.
Yes, it is me. I am here against my will once more. What's up, Cal?
Welcome to the pit of despair. You're trapped within the horn forever. What will you ever do?
The seventh circle of the horn. Run the theme song.
And welcome back. As always, we are going to jump directly into the news. Our first little piece of discussion today. Mark Rosewater has said that consumers objectively love Universes Beyond. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's wrong. It's a little long, but I'm going to read out both the question and the answer that Mark Rosewater received and gave over on his Tumblr blog, Blogatog. Question. Regarding my last comment about consumer trust, it's difficult to take you at your word about it when you make vague statements like, the players spoke. Who? Until this was announced, none I know said that they wanted Universes Beyond. The responses to this saying, data shows or players want don't mean anything if the data is a secret. From what little is public, it just looks like WotC saw dollar signs and went back on their statement. Being more transparent about these decisions / the reasons for it could help. And the answer, the best-selling booster release, Commander decks, Secret Lairs, all Universes Beyond, and the vast majority of buyers, existing Magic players. The sets that score the highest in market research, Universes Beyond. The upcoming sets that have the highest social media engagement, Universes Beyond. Universes Beyond is killing it in every metric we use to measure overall player happiness. It is our job to pay attention to what players want. You, again, the collective you, representing the totality of players, is quite vocal. They really like Universes Beyond. That's why we're doing so much of it. He also went on to clarify in a couple more answers to other questions that, you know, people were like, oh, social media. So people are complaining and you say that's good. And he went on to clarify they track both. And there is a lot of positive social media hype about the upcoming Universes Beyond, that kind of stuff. Obviously, we've known that these sets are incredibly monetarily successful in the past, but I think a lot of people, myself included, sometimes kind of assume that maybe they're really successful because there are a lot of relatively unengaged people who see, oh, another Lord of the Rings thing in Walmart and buy it, or so on and so forth. And also, I think I also have kind of assumed that a lot of people have maybe been begrudgingly interacting with these things because they quote unquote have to, which, like in the case of some stuff like Lord of the Rings, if you wanted to play modern, you quite literally have to. If you want to build a specific commander deck, maybe you absolutely quote unquote have to. In some legacy decks, maybe you have to, right? But it was very interesting for me to see someone from Wizards of the Coast say both that the vast majority of buyers are existing Magic players, and also that they score so highly, by which I mean the highest, in their market research. I don't know if those are things specifically that I maybe would have anticipated hearing so strongly from a WotC employee. Dan, this is not exactly the most Universes Beyond friendly show. It is interesting.
Are we markedly haters? Yeah.
I don't know if we're markedly haters.
There's probably more negative comments than positive, though, over time.
I would say so.
Probably.
I would say that is the case. But I, just like anyone else, have fallen prey many a time to saying, well, I like that property, so that's okay. Which is how I feel about Aether Drift online this week. But we'll talk about that on the next episode.
I got to pick your brain about that one, too.
But are you surprised by this? Are you interested by this? Do you think that Wizards of the Coast is like looking at this data and maybe barking up the wrong tree or pushing too hard, or what? I'm interested in hearing your thoughts.
Well, I guess to start off, no, I'm not surprised to hear that these are the most financially successful sets, the most talked about sets. I guess I'm a little bit surprised to see that the social media metric is like overwhelmingly positive about it. And I think that probably has to do with, again, like the spheres that you and I exist within as like content creators on the internet. We hear a lot of like extremely loud opinions. They're in the world of algorithms and stuff too, extremely negative opinions often do better than extremely positive opinions. Yeah. I'm not really surprised to see that. But yeah, it doesn't feel that way in my heart.
Yes, sure.
But I can't accept that this is the truth. Yes, it is weird, but of course it makes a lot of sense. I guess the thing I'm most surprised by is the fact that the vast majority of people who are buying these are the invested players. I would assume that we would see maybe, I don't know, I guess I might be surprised to see that we were pulling in more people than we had, than pre-existing players buying these products. But like you said, it makes sense. If you want to play Modern in all of last year, you need 4 One Rings. You need to go out and buy 4 One Ring bundles or whatever the One Ring came in.
The easiest way to get a One Ring for a while was basically buying the Lord of the Rings Fat Pack bundle, whatever they're called these days. Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, generally, as far as the sets have gone, the draftable sets, they've been good. They've been fun. The more promotional sets, I don't know, they're so easy because there are so many of them, especially because there are secret layers and things like that. It is so easy to just have them go right over your head and not really pay attention to them. So I guess that's where I'm the most surprised of wow, these are consistently gaining the amount of traction that they want, where this is where they want to put all of their energy. Because if you look at the release schedule this year, we've got Aether Drift and Dragons of Tarkir are 2 in-universe sets. And besides that, we've got, I think, 4 Universes Beyond major releases.
We've got Torkir, Dragonstorm. We have upcoming Aether Drift. After that, yes, Universes Beyond Final Fantasy. After that, there is Edge of Eternity in August, which is technically a Magic set, but I think it's going to be another one that a lot of people are going to kind of struggle with, because it's they've said it's top-down space opera. So we'll see how that goes. Depending on, it could really hit the marker, it could really miss. And then there is Spider-Man in Q3, and then there is unnamed Universes Beyond tentpole set, so standard legal set in Q4. So we have 3 more. We have 3 Universes Beyond sets. Sorry, 3 more normal kind of quote unquote Magic IP, albeit the weird Omen path world we're in now, where almost every set is really funky, top down, hyper pop culture. And then we have 2 major universes. Oh, 3 Universes Beyond sets, because I keep forgetting about Final Fantasy in between Edge of Eternities and Tarkir.
Yeah.
But
it's a lot coming on the weird year. This year. Yeah, yep. It's going to be an adjustment year for sure. Because as much as we have talked about the flood of Universes Beyond products, it's going to feel that way in a much different way this year for sure.
Yes.
I don't know. it has canonically taken Wizards not a long time, but like a year or 2 to 3 to like really change their production habits in terms of like how long it takes to listen to an audience, take that in, see how well it reflects where the company wants to go monetarily or otherwise, and then putting that into action into the production line, because we are like years ahead in the future in terms of like development for sets and things like that, obviously. So I'm curious to see what the public reaction will be to the more inundated Universes Beyond year that we're about to have.
Yeah, 2025 is going to be a weird year in general. I think my main concern about this kind of line of reasoning, which maybe, I'm sure what Mark Rosewater is, for all that we know, is saying is objectively correct, right? He has the data. We don't. Wizards of the Coast has the data, and we do not in front of us. But like you said, Wizards, I think, has a really big history of over-indexing on something that is successful for them. And then we get a little sick of it because they over-indexed on it. And just by the nature of each set being made a year and a half plus out, by the time it's locked, because they have to physically manufacture these sets and all that kind of stuff. They have a really long lead time on this stuff. Like for example, we're currently in the middle of an Aether Drift preview season where a lot of people are like, okay, this is a little too meta. This is a little more jokey. Why aren't we focusing more on Avishkar? Why aren't we focusing more on Amonkhet? The planes this set is technically on Muruganda. When, one of the very top level, like, lessons learned from Mark Rosewater's 2024, like, lessons learned article was, we went too far in that direction. That is something we learned from the sets that came out this year. But for all we know, the rest, Edge of Eternities and Tarkir Dragonstorm, and obviously also Aether Drift, may be very well still leaned pretty hard in that direction because they hadn't really received that feedback yet by the time they were locking these sets. And I do wonder if we're going to end up in the same spot with Secret Lair. Obviously, really invested players have had their legitimate complaints with Secret Lair, including the amount of it that has already existed. Mark Rosewater has said that is not reflected in the actual data and the reward systems that they look to learn whether or not how people actually realistically feel about things in a way that affects Wizards of the Coast. But when they were making the decisions on how they wanted to lay out 2025, when the decision was made to bump return to Lorwyn back to 2026 to replace it with a Universes Beyond set, it could very well could have been in the height of, Lord of the Rings. I would say, outside of some one or two, just actual development mistakes with the One Ring and maybe Orcish Bowmasters or whatever, I would say a borderline universally beloved set, actually.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back and listen to the things that we've said about it over time, we have been, I think, pretty happy with it over time.
Yeah, I think there's a world where a lot of these decisions with that long lead time were being made in the light of, Lord of the Rings was really successful. People loved the 40k Commander decks. We now see people love the Fallout Commander decks. All of these Secret Lair Universes Beyond have sold out instantly, and the people who were upset about them were a little less upset about them because we've developed the universe within technology to reprint them in the future, which is now gone. I think I am interested to see how these data points change, if they change at all, when we now move into, I would say, what is objectively the year of Universes Beyond, with 3 whole standard level sets being Universes Beyond. We haven't even gotten to our first standard Universes Beyond set yet, so we don't know how the reception will be on that one. Wizards doesn't know how the reception will be on that one, but the horse and the cart are, I don't know how that expression goes.
Putting the cart in front of the horse, I believe.
They are simply not putting the cart before the horse. But just by the function of the way that Wizards has to make their decisions, to your point, Wizards kind of just has to make guesses, and then they have to deal with whatever the blowback is after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably inevitably going to come into a situation where this is going to be a little bit too much, just because that's the way it kind of has to go. If you think about it in terms of if you think about it in terms of a video game industry and having to make a system that will not become obsolete with technology within the next 3 to 5 years, that's what Wizards is trying to do in terms of making these sets and decisions of I really hope that everyone does not hate this in time, by time all of these things come out, but there's really no way to judge how that's going to go. They are in this spot of having to plan out a couple of years in advance or a year or more. And that is just, sort of the way it has to go, during these periods of time. We're just going to probably get a little bit too much of a taste of it by the end of it.
And I think it will be an interesting year too, because like the two sets we know, I would say, are relatively beloved IP, right? Like there's a lot of people, there's obviously a lot of crossover between invested Magic fans and invested Final Fantasy fans. Obviously Spider-Man, I must admit, I personally became like 20% more interested in the Marvel set when they said it's only Spider-Man and like Spider-Man villains and Spider-Man stuff compared to like all of Marvel. But, and I'm sure some people feel the same way. And if the rumors that people have spread around are correct about the final set of the year being Avatar: The Last Airbender, I'm sure there's a lot of fandom crossover there. It's one of my favorite media properties of all time. I personally, again, would be really hype about that, as suspect as I am as of even that being a standard legal set. So it'll be an interesting year. It very well even could be that this happens. We look back at the end of the year and are like, well, maybe would us old heads have preferred it if these were all, to use Magic the Gathering's own term from their panel at Vegas, Magic IP sets. Yeah, but will it be as bad as some people have predicted? Maybe not. But then we'll go into the future of another year where they maybe have to make 1 to 3 Universes Beyond IP standard sets, and then what IP do we move to next? I know a lot of people have a lot of Universes Beyond fans have tried to downplay that area of concern, but I still think it's one of my really big ones. Is, eventually it has felt so far to me like Universes Beyond at least has been largely focused on intellectual property that is like large enough that feels like it could be, I don't want to say worthy of Magic the Gathering or whatever, but you know what I mean. It's like,
well, yeah, there are some fictional universes that just don't have as much depth as you would need to go into for a full like standard Magic set.
Yep. And I feel like before people realize it, we will be running low on those IPs, especially IPs that are deep enough, interesting enough, have enough, wide enough customer base. And then what? I don't know. Anyways, Dan, do you have anything else?
No, I mean, yeah, we've gotten comments on that in the past that we are a little bit too down on there being enough IPs out there, but I also stand by that opinion. I don't know. We will run out. There are only so many Star Wars and Lord of the Rings.
And we haven't even gotten Star Wars, so no. And maybe we won't. There's
Disney property, hard to do.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and move on to the next point. In case you didn't know, Magic the Gathering Online has been having some technical issues recently with lag. Pretty bad lag issues, both seeming to be in the past on server side and more recently client side. Just game actions take a really long time to complete at random, so badly that people have noted like multi-minute like real-time like differences in between their like chess clock, how much time they've been spent in a match compared to a chess clock, which of course in a program which already has a lot of points where you kind of have to like move something, wait a second, hit okay, hit yes, wait a second, move something. If any of those point to point interactions get a little more laggy, suddenly it is a little miserable. It can become a little miserable to play Magic the Gathering Online. Luckily, Magic the Gathering Online currently has a steward which seems very interested in taking very good care of it in Daybreak Games. It does seem like they've been really on top of it. They've already put out at least one major patch to address it, and it like made it better for a while. Now people are kind of having issues again. If you are a Magic the Gathering Online player experiencing lag, I just wanted to spread awareness a little bit that Daybreak is still actively looking for bug reports and feedback of where you encounter lag in the program. And they have further fixes planned for next week's downtime. Dan, have you played any Moto recently?
Not heavily enough to have really experienced all of the lag issues, because the last patch that they did did really fix up a lot of it, which has been quite nice. I have only really played just a few matches of Legacy and dipped my toes into Modern recently, so I haven't experienced as much as the lag, but I have come to understand through many people on the internet that it's been quite the problem over the last few weeks. But yeah, Daybreak has been, I mean, all right, I'm an MTGO creator, so take everything I say with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Hashtag sponsored.
Daybreak has, as you said, like taken a really like forward approach to how they manage MTGO, though, like where in the past, I feel like so much of the complaints for MTGO have been fallen on deaf ears. Since Daybreak has taken over, they've taken a really active approach to, how they're handling things, how they're communicating with the public that they're handling things. And, at least as far as like being very forward facing about the progress they're making, I enjoy that quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. So that's just a small little note. If you are a Magic the Gathering player who has been Magic the Gathering online player who's been frustrated by these things, please reach out to Daybreak. They would love to hear from you. They would love to hear where you're experiencing problems, because they are very actively trying to fix these things. And speaking of Magic the Gathering online, Duel Commander, the 1v1 commander format with 20 life in a very extensive and actively curated ban list, has had a ban update. I say speaking of Magic the Gathering online because it has relatively recently been added on there kind of as an official supported format. Again, like Daybreak seems to be really on top of this stuff. They added the kind of like CEDH leagues there for a while, thanks to some demand, and there was a lot of demand for Duel Commander, so they added that in. They seem to be really willing to just try a lot of cool stuff with the platform. You know, they've bumped up how many cubes they're putting on there. They have Vintage Cube around all the time, so Dan can always get their fix. But there is a Duel Commander ban update. Ezio Ettore di Firenze, I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm not an Assassin's Creed head. Is now banned as a commander only. It's not really surprising to me. They are technically a 5-drop commander that only costs 2, so you can play them for 2 mana, and then all of your free commander spells are online. I assume that's the problem. I'm just assuming. But cheap 5-color commanders seem bad. They also banned Balance, Reanimate, and White Plume Adventurer. Those all track for me. Mod, Dan, you're giving a big thumbs down. What's wrong?
Thumbs down for banning Balance. I love Balance. That's one of my favorite Magic cards, and there's so few places you can play it. I think might be only Vintage Cube and Vintage now. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Balance. Can you think about
why that may be, Dan? Thoughts?
Because the card's too fun, because it's too rad.
People are having too much fun. They're getting too excited.
They were probably reports of people having heart attacks and then scribbling on pieces of paper, I'm having too much fun playing MTGO and casting Balance.
And
then, hell, and then it trails off at the end. Too many reports of that, I would assume. Haven't read the report.
I did see it popped up across my Facebook feed because I've been following like the Duel Commander page since like 2015 or whatever. And there was so many comments that were like, "Oh, so now you ban Balance?"
Well, there's a lot more eyes on it than there used to be. I'm sure.
Exactly.
Yep. Now it's not Wizards who runs this ban list, though, right?
No, this is also a community-run format. There's a pretty extensive, I believe, panel of people that kind of make these decisions, and they have a fairly extensive watch list, or at least have in the past, and all that kind of stuff. It's like a very, very face-up format, and it's also a format that in my time from kind of watching from a distance, there has been a lot of action. It seems like almost every time when they do have a ban announcement, they've been unbanning a card, banning 2 cards, unbanning 2 cards, adding a card to the commander ban list, taking a card off the commander ban list. It seems to be very active. I do know like one of the not problems, but a big thing that caused a shakeup and caused the format to be like more active in the ban and unban department. At a point in time, they did lower the life total from 30 to 20 because they were like, this is too much of a mid-range fest. What if you could just kill your opponents? And then that has resulted in some stuff like Ajani, Nakala Pariah, is banned in the format because mono white aggro was too strong.
Good. Yeah, that makes sense. With only 20 life, it's not that hard to deal 20 damage.
Exactly. Especially with the Johnny, just flip him over. Boom.
I would give that 5 big booms.
Target player.
Target player gets 5 big booms.
Yeah. But they did also unban Akiri Lineslinger, which is, if you're not familiar, that's a Commander 2016 partner. It gets +1/+0 for each partner you control. First strike vigilance. It costs a single red and a single white. I imagine in the past, again, that was probably just like way too strong of an aggro commander, and especially given the fact that it has partner. But
Boros technology has come a long way in terms of the equipment commander, though.
Yes, definitely. And it also does kind of seem that the format has come a long way in the aggro department as well. I was maybe talking out of my butt a little too fast here. You know, they had to ban Ezio, and I said maybe it's because he's too expensive. I'm glancing at this ban list, and do you know who I don't see on it? Rograk.
Oh, so, really? Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I take it back. I'll take my medicine. I won't even edit it out. I won't even edit me being blatantly wrong about something out of the podcast. I brushed past Ezio a little too quickly because it set off my alarm bells of, oh, it's a cheap 5-color commander. Well, it's a 5-color commander, listener, because it says when Ezio deals combat damage to a player, you may pay Wooburg, white, blue, black, red, and green. If that player has 10 or less life, when you do, that player loses the game. And it's a 2-drop 3/2 with menace. So even if you just have Ezio on the battlefield, he can lower your opponent's life total to 10 pretty quickly, I imagine. And then you can just Wooburg him and kill him. So yeah, I can, in addition to just then the rest of the deck just getting to be like 5-color good stuff or some kind of 5-color aggressive pile. I get it. I take it back. Duel Commander players, in recompense, I will play your format. I will play your format as punishment. How about that?
Who's your commander going to be?
No, it is a really cool format that has always intrigued me ever since all the way back in college. There is, in like a specific area of Michigan, Duel Commander is really popular. And a buddy of mine at college, who was one of the few other people I ran into who played Magic, was like into Duel Commander, was into French, as it was more commonly known back then. And ever since then, it's just always been in the back of my brain ever since he was begging me to play it with him. He's like, guys, I swear it's fun. Here's my Skithrix mono black aggro deck that since the life total is still 30, aggro isn't very good yet. But you know what's pretty easy to do? Hitting you for 10 with Skithrix and you die to Infect. And we were all like, what are you talking about? I cast Llanowar Elf. That's not fun. I'm trying to cast Cruffix over here. Please settle down.
Oh my gosh, what a time. What a time. RIP that little bastard.
But hey, now that it's on Modo, you know, I can boot up a card hoarder, my card hoarder subscription again, maybe try it out. I apologize, Duel Commander players. I was not familiar with your game.
Yeah, I still haven't tried it as well. It's on the list, but I mean, every format is on the list. So
every format's on the list. You've been playing less Magic than you'd used to, and 9 times out of 10, when you boot up Modo, you're actually just going to be playing Vintage Cube if it's available. So it's real far down the list.
I check the limited tab first every single time.
Is Vintage Cube up? No,
it's not up right now. Cool, so that's why I've been playing less MTGO.
Well, one more bit of news here, just a little bit of event-based housekeeping. The NRG Championship Series 2025 is now underway with Season 1. They announced all of the dates and all that kind of stuff. They did before, but they have been highlighting them again, so I wanted to highlight them really quick in case anyone's interested. February 1st and 2nd, which is this weekend, if you were listening on release week, they are going to be in Chicagoland with a 10K Modern event and a 10K Team Trios Trial. March 15th and 16th in Madison, Wisconsin, a 10K Standard and 5K Pioneer event. May 11th and 12th in Chicagoland, again, 10K Modern and 5K Standard. And then in June 28th and 29th, they're going to be a little closer to my neck of the woods in Indianapolis, Indiana, with a 10K Standard event and a 10K Team Sealed event. Love what NRG is doing. They're really doing their best to kind of keep the tour vibe that we used to get from SEG alive with their leaderboard. You know, you finish well at these events, you go on the leaderboard, you get invited to the championship, the invitational at the end of the year. Some exciting times, and I hope that they can continue to keep doing what they're doing. It's time for Constructed Corner Modern Edition. This last weekend, we had the regional championship Ultimate Guard European Magic Series at Prague. It was a modern event, and this event was really exciting because it's our first truly really big modern event with stakes that we have had since the big shakeup of unbans and bans. It was won by Alexander Rowan on Breach. Breach combo deck. This is an Underworld Breach based combo deck that has had much increasing success since the Mox Opal unban powered it up. Nothing is going to help out a largely artifact based combo deck like unbanning the best artifact based deck, Mana Rock. So it's not exactly surprising. Have you got a chance to interact with Teamer Breach at all beyond watching our favorite content creator Steve Stillman's video on the topic, Dan?
I haven't not gotten my chance to play it yet, although I'm a huge fan of it because I do love the Underworld Breach plus Malevolent Rumble combo. But no, I haven't gotten to play it yet. I dipped my toes into Modern with the Boros Energy deck first. But this one also looks like a ton of fun. This is a very me deck. I'm a big fan of Underworld Breach and combos. And yeah, getting to do this in Modern is particularly wild. Modern is such a wild format compared to like the Modern that I used to play in 2016.
Mm-hmm. I do also love that. Like kind of post ban. It felt like a little bit pre ban, but especially post ban. Everyone is playing Tameo Inquisitive Student now. Like, fascinating to just see like her in a Breach deck, which, you know, I assume she helps out with the plan a little bit, but
she makes the clue tokens when she attacks. She makes the helps turn on Metalcraft. But other than that, like, it's just a really fantastic one drop. Like, if you're just playing it on turn one, getting your clues, it's great advantage. If you ever happen to flip it, which I guess Brainstorm is not legal in Modern, but there are plenty of ways to do it with different cantrips. Like getting to flip it early and like it just completely hoses any sort of aggro decks. It really slows people down, and the Snapcaster effect on the down tick is like also quite powerful.
And I guess like, yeah, I'm not, you know, I'm looking at this list and nothing is popping out to me super easily like a way you would flip her. Like there's some preordains and obviously she makes the clues and that kind of stuff. So you could like crack a Mishra's Bauble on someone else's end step and then draw a card on your upkeep and then draw a card for your draw step and then crack a clue or something, or like cast Flame of Anor, I guess, is the easiest way to do it. There is one Flame of Anor in this winning deck list.
Importantly, it's also a one-drop legend to go along with Emery to turn on your Mox Ambers in the deck.
Yeah, definitely. There is 3 Mox Amber as well, kind of just as a not quite a second copy of Mox Opal, but, you know, tapping for blue ain't that bad at all. So very interesting to see this deck, which I saw a lot of people predicting to be very strong going into the weekend, taking it down. Not surprising at all. The rest of the top 64 were pretty interesting. A lot of Boros Energy, again, predictable. A lot of Breach, again, predictable. And then a lot of people knew, I think like Eldrazi Ramp was a known deck. I don't think a lot of people were expecting it to be this successful. I think it kind of took the place of maybe what a lot of people were expecting the Psychic Frog decks to do. I know like Psychic Frog decks were kind of primed for a breakout weekend, and it seems that instead Eldrazi Ramp stole the show instead, including getting second place. The runner-up for this event was playing Eldrazi Ramp. There's also a lot of cool Death and Taxes lists all over. They really rely upon Overlord of the Baelmerk and some new MH3 cards. If you are a pre-Modern Horizons 1 Death and Taxes player, like I happen to be from time to time,
that's
you will,
why I don't like you.
Yeah, exactly. You will recognize basically zero of the cards in this deck list, except
it still
for
plays Flagstones.
Yep, it still plays Flagstones. In some of the lists, not all of them, but there is like some Flicker Wisps, and of course there is, as always, 4 Aether Vial. But kind of a different vibe to these lists. They really just want to put Overlord of the Baelmerk into play and like trigger it as many times as possible, and you know, kind of navigate that to a win, which is interesting and cool, I suppose.
I mean, that's a really meaningful card advantage engine that a deck like this just hasn't had access to.
Yeah, exactly. Mill myself, pick up a really good creature. Aether Violet into play. Let's go, baby.
Yeah, it's basically draw a card every single turn, like draw Impulse every single turn at your end step.
Exactly. So the other deck I really wanted to shout out from this event that I saw was a Bloodchief Broodscale combo deck is in the top 8. I'm going to read some cards here for you listeners. It uses Basking Broodscale, which we have mentioned on the show before when we're talking about Pauper. It's a really good Pauper card right now. 2-drop, Devoid, 2/2. You can pay 1 and a green to adapt 1, which is put a +1/+1 counter on it. But most importantly, whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters on Basking Broodscale, you may create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice this creature, add a colorless. That is step 1. You need a Basking Broodscale. Step 2, you need a Blade of the Bloodchief. That is a card from Zendikar. Yeah. It costs... So. It is a 1-drop enchantment. You can equip it for 1, and it says, whenever a creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on equipped creature. If equipped creature is a vampire, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it instead. So you can really easily see what this does here. You equip the Blade of the Bloodchief to the Basking Broodscale. Sacrifice, get a +1/+1 counter on it in any way. It'll make an Eldrazi Scion. Sacrifice the Eldrazi Scion. That'll trigger a creature dies effect on Blade of the Bloodchief. Put a +1/+1 counter on the equipped creature, which is the Basking Broodscale. You make another Scion, etc., etc., etc. And the deck had it effectively generates infinite Scion ETBs, infinite Scion deaths, and also infinite colorless mana, at least as many times as you would like to do it. And then the deck did have 1 or 2 different ways that it could kind of take advantage of that much mana. I think some of the most notable being you could dump a ton of mana into Kozilek's Command if that's relevant. It's probably not. You could cast an Emrakul the Promised End because there's one of those in the deck. But the main way that they're maximizing and winning the game with this is with Glaring Fresh Striker, another classic MA3 card. It costs 2 and a colorless mana, 2/2. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, you make an Eldrazi spawn, which may be relevant. But then whenever another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So if you get Basking Broodscale plus Blade of the Bloodchief, you'll start making infinite mana, have infinite ETB, have infinite die triggers. And then if you can figure out a way to get a Glaring Flesh Striker onto the battlefield, you will win the game. This deck is insane.
This really is a sort of collected company kind of deck that you used to see. It's asking for a lot of different things to come together. But the individual pieces aren't so bad. I mean, there's four Glaring Flesh Rakers. So obviously that is just an absolute powerhouse of a card. The entire deck is built around triggering, the Flesh Raker with the 4 Kozilek's Command. That makes it a lot easier than it would have been in previous days to set something like this up. 4 Malevolent Rumbles helps find all your creatures as well. And 1 Traverse the Uvenwald in this deck list on MTG Top 8, which is also pretty sweet.
I did love the also 2 of Revitalizing Repast. It costs a hybrid Golgari instant, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains indestructible at end of turn, and it's a land on the back. Oh man, I would like to attempt a Basking Broodscale combo. Your opponent, I'd like to remove your Basking Broodscale. Well, in response, I'm going to give it indestructible and start the combo. Incredible.
It's very, very sweet.
No notes. This deck cooks with the lights on, so to speak.
Cooks with the lights on. That is the best PC way of saying that I've ever heard.
I'm mixing my metaphors, but you know what I mean. You mentioned
with the horse before the cart.
You mentioned these old creature toolbox sets that used to exist. There was a player in the top 32, Thomas Monk, who brought a 4 Court of Calling, 2 Green Sun Zenith, 4 Birthing Ritual deck, which is just an absolute pile of creature-based win cons. We've got the Samwise Gamgee combo. We've got a Malia Wild Growth combo. We have a Sylvan Safekeeper in here. There's Cauldron Familiars. There's Orcish Bowmaster.
Couple of Wild Growth Walkers. Take me back.
Yeah, exactly. This deck is just what if I stuffed as many creature-based win cons, A plus Bs or even A plus B plus Cs as I could into one deck, and then just 4 Court of Calling, 2 Green Sun Zenith, 4 Birthing Ritual. Heck, there's even a Grist in here. What could go wrong?
The birthing ritual is really sweet. If anyone does not remember birthing ritual, maybe a little bit underbeloved enchantment from Modern Horizons 3. Costs 1 and a green at the beginning of your end step. If you control a creature, look at the top 7 cards of your library. Then you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, you can put a card with mana value X or less from among them, where X is equal to 1 plus sacrifice creature's mana value. Rest go on bottom in a random order. So a pretty sweet card. It asks for a bit, but it's nice that it doesn't make you sacrifice, and like really, really sweet to put together combos like this. This
yeah,
is
exactly.
An extremely cool deck.
In between like the pick up a certain amount of cards and the mana cost and the effect, it kind of almost makes me think like, what if Sylvan Library and Birthing Pod had a baby? Is like kind of how it lives in my mind. It's such a sick card.
Yeah, a really great addition to the Court of Calling Green Sun package to like round out your getting all my combo pieces.
Yeah,
onto
getting
the
all your creatures
package
out here. Yeah, exactly. So that was Regional Championship. Ultimate Guard, here in the constructed corner. We're not really providing metagame analysis. I'm just I'm enjoying looking at these events and looking at deck lists and saying which ones I think are cool. I think that's fun. I did also want to shout out, I did get to watch it a bit this weekend. The coverage, they did a really great job. And I didn't see it myself, but I saw some people highlighting online. They had an interview package with RK Post, like to run in their downtime. You know, why aren't we interviewing artists more? Why aren't we interviewing people adjacent to the game more at these events? You know, we have all of these awesome artists at events. Yeah. Pull them aside during some downtime, record an interview package with them, and then be able to run that when, it's time to go, right? Just do it. It sounds awesome. I would love to see more of that specifically moving forward. Love to see people trying new stuff, or, maybe, I'm sure maybe this has been done before, but it's nice to see it done in 2025. That is the type of thing I would love to see in coverage more. And that's all we have for the constructed corner. And that is also all we have for this half of the Herald's Horn. As always, Dan, is there anything else you would like to leave our listeners with before we go?
Yeah, it's cold outside. Be good to your neighbors. Take some pocket change around with you. If people ask you for change, give it to them.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan. We have a great interview coming up. You're going to love it. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Today on the show, I am joined by Dan Sheehan, author, comedian, host of the Pie Break podcast, former host of the Commander Sphere podcast, and an all-around great guy. Today, we are talking about, I set out trying to talk about, the how we go about starting new projects. But of course, it then launched into a conversation more centered around making things, the highs and lows of making things, making new things, leaving old things behind, and our current media landscape and how hard it is maybe to be a person who just wants to chill out and make stuff. It's a great conversation. Let's get into it. And welcome back. On this episode, I am joined by the one, the only Dan Sheehan. Say hello, Dan.
Hi. Hey, how we doing?
Oh, we're doing just great. We're hanging out. It's nice and toasty in my house. Loving life. How are you doing, Dan?
Doing good. It's similarly toasty in my house. We've got the weird California thing where even though it's pretty warm during the winter, no place has good insulation. So
sure.
Your house is just sort of drafty. So I ran a little heater. But yeah, we've endured the fires for the most part, which is nice.
That is nice.
And so we're hanging in there.
Very nice. Very good. I'm glad that you survived the fires. It's a good thing to. Did they change your opinion upon natural disasters any, or?
I don't like it. I'm gonna tell you right now. I'm not a fire
controversial.
guy. Yeah, it's a huge hot take for me personally, but I am willing to say fire is just not my personal idea of a fun time.
Sure. A hot take.
Exactly. We were not in like the evacuation range or anything like that.
Yeah.
We were just like in the ashes falling and everyone tells us it's full of asbestos range.
Sure.
So we still evacuated for a bit. returned, and yeah, then it rained. So now we're feeling pretty safe.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. Well, I'm glad that you're staying safe. Unfortunately, you did have to evacuate for a little bit, but hey, now you're back at home. You're chilling.
Yeah.
And you have decided to leave your home to step into the Horn.
Exactly. I've tumbled ass first into the Horn.
So you have tumbled ass first into the Horn. How brave. Pum. And today, I brought you on today to pick your brain a little bit about something that I've been thinking a lot about recently. It's maybe even our first interview on the show that's not like, it can be directly related to Magic in both of our cases, but it doesn't have to be related to Magic. So that's a first for these interviews.
And perhaps shouldn't be. Could be anything.
It could be anything. But today I wanted to talk about the pursuit of new creative projects. I think creative people can have a tendency of bouncing around, always having new things they want to explore. Or maybe they don't, or they're forced into doing so.
Yeah.
at the sake of not having anything else to do, because something else changed underneath of them.
As it so often feels, I think sometimes it's like the platform changes or something like that. So we have to change with it. And yeah, it's like in the case of like so much of the stuff that I've done where it's just like, as trends shift, I feel like I've had to shift what I do. I try to always have a new thing cooking just to keep my brain from screaming, that's kind of,
definitely. I think that's one of the real, I think that's one of the real downsides of creative projects or being a creative person is that, the fun part of so many creative projects is the ideation phase. You're thinking, you're cooking, you're envisioning all of these cool things you could do. Doing the work is exciting at first, and then like eventually, especially on a kind of a more sustained creative project, like one could say a podcast or related, that eventually sometimes it does become a little workish and a little less creative-ish. So a great way to keep the creative juice flowing is with a new project.
It can be so tough to figure it because like I feel like there's a reason that the most successful people, like when you talk about creative industries, are not necessarily the people who have like the most original ideas or the most like, or who are the most even influential, where it's just like it's consistency is the thing, because there's kind of these two brains, right? Where there's the artist brain and then there's the business brain. And the person who has like 50% of both is going to have the best chance of like, if you want to talk about like writing as a career, like that's who gets to, do any sort of art as a career, is the person who has pretty solid ideas and pretty solid work ethic. Mm-hmm. It's like if you've got really bad ideas and really great work ethic, that's the quadrant I like to call the saddest thing you've ever seen.
Sure.
Where it's just somebody who is like on the every week with just nothing. It's the you go girl, give us nothing.
Yeah.
And then everyone knows the all ideas, no follow through. That's the person who like comes up to you and is like, I had an idea for something like that. And you're like, cool, what is it? And they're like, that's this. And it's like, have you done it? And they're like,
no, I haven't done it, but I've been thinking about doing it and you stole it from me.
Yeah. Which I still think is like, there's some valid, like, I think when you get outside of the idea of like there's making art and then there's making money, and some people are lucky enough to do both. But I think there is value to like, I have stories that I've wanted to write for years that I just never will, unless I win the lottery and find myself with infinite free time to pursue absolutely everything
that you want to do. Yeah.
And instead they're just stories I walk myself through before I go to sleep, because wouldn't it be fun if I wrote it someday? And maybe I will. I think there is incredible value to that stuff, and I think it is closer to like what art is trying to do for our like minds and souls than like commercialized art. But then when you get into like, kind of creating things as like, you know, as a capital C creator or whatever, they have a little bit less value then, like, and can sometimes torment you if your like brain isn't tooled into the right, you know, settings to approach things, I don't know, with kind of like measured expectations.
Maybe measured expectations of the downfall of creatives everywhere.
Yeah. I'm as guilty as anyone. When I was like doing the YouTube video thing briefly after we ended Commander Sphere, I was just like, all right, like I've got like 4 or 5 great video ideas and I think everyone else is going to agree that they're great. And like, you know, then at that point I'll just figure it out. And like, I assumed it was going to grow really quickly. And then I quickly learned what every person on YouTube learns, which is that it's like slow, sustained success gets you there.
Actually, that what matters is being in the same spot at the same time for 3 years, and then you'll maybe get somewhere. Yeah.
And for me, the biggest, I think, threat to new creative projects is new creative projects.
Sure. Yeah.
I think like there's such a thrill in the new idea, kind of like you were saying, and there's always another one. Like there's always something that sounds really great in theory, right? And when you start getting into the shit with like a real project, where I'm in it right now, where I have this thing that I've been working on for ages that I am like in the not fun part where I have to write 10,000 words a week for the next couple of months if I want to hit the deadline that I've been shooting for. And that is not as fun as like, oh, here's an outline of how it's going to play out. And of course, like that chapter will be really great. Like it's
when I get there, it'll be awesome.
Yeah. Once I get there, once I write it and it's like, oh man, I made this future Dan's problem and I am now presently future Dan. So yeah, I think it's like, it's interesting to kind of balance that love of the new with follow through to make a thing real, but then like also understanding that not everything has to be real to have value.
Sure. Yeah. So many things can simply just have value to you and don't have to have value to other people. I think that's one of the biggest like disconnects, maybe even between like the making of art and the making of money, which you mentioned earlier. There's plenty of art that could be made out there that could be subjectively good for you, or something you're interested in making, or a creative project that you're interested in making. But if the concern is making money, then you also have to worry about what other people will think about it and how other people will consume it.
Yeah, and it's like not meant for everyone. I mean, for a lot of reasons, because it's like it's a temperament thing where if you are deciding to make your art into your living, you are knowingly or not entering an industry full of rejection in which your art is going to be judged not as art, but as a product, which I think very few people are prepared for, especially in like not just the economy of like gatekeepers where it's like you submit a short story to a journal or something and they say they don't like it. You can kind of tell yourself like, well, you know, they're all a bunch of like, they're all a bunch of like Ivy League people anyway. I'm in my own, I'm doing my own thing. Or this like didn't really match their voice. But when you get into like social stuff and there's just this amorphous, like no one likes it sort of feeling that you get when you start putting stuff out on the internet. I think that can be really rough on a lot of people, especially now when like when I started doing all this stuff and just throwing shit out on the internet, like the algorithm was good. Like you could find an audience for doing nothing if your stuff was interesting. But now with everything having these like, finely tuned algorithms meant to basically be like, does this cause conflict? Does this make you buy a product? If not, I don't want to see it. Like, what is that? A link? Get it out of here.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people
taking people off of our platform. Wrong. Yeah.
A lot of people are dumping their hearts and souls onto the feed, and then when they get nothing, they're taking it really personally. And so it's like, that's the thing I these days warn people. I used to, I don't know, I feel like my spiel when someone's like, oh, I know a kid who's like about to graduate college who wants to like write or do this or that. Like, do you want to talk to him? The whole spiel has changed, I feel like, over the last few years.
So the secret is just don't. No.
Yeah. I've had to stop short of that because I remember when I started doing stand-up, people would tell me like, stop if you can. And I'd be like, that doesn't help me.
But I'm doing stand-up to do stand-up.
Yeah. And at 22, the thing that makes you keep going is people saying stop.
Sure. Yeah.
it's like, you know, when it comes to like creative pursuits and stuff, because how many stories have we taken in over our, you know, lives about like, you know, a person who made art or, you know, did anything and everyone told them not to do it and then they did it anyway. And so it's like everyone kind of places themselves in the center of that narrative. And like, I also just like don't feel like I have the authority to tell anyone like,
don't do what you want to do.
Yeah, because it's like, I don't know, like so much of the stuff I did when I was 22 was bad.
It was dumb.
Yeah, and it still laid the groundwork for, you know, wherever it is I've landed. And so it's like, it is interesting to find a way to tell people like, hey, it's as bad as it's ever been out here. Mm-hmm. But if you are going to do it, here are some ways to kind of like protect yourself.
I think one of the weird things about pursuing new creative projects, especially when, like you were saying, like the greatest downfall of new creative projects is like other new creative projects. But I think when pursuing a new creative project, it very often, especially if you are someone who has been creative for some amount of time, it does also come with like hand in hand with like the death or the abdication of or the letting go of a previous creative project or effort and that kind of stuff. And sometimes it can be a little hard to let that stuff go. It's so weird for me still. Like my second ever major creative effort in my life after college was joining Playing with Power, which is insane, actually.
Whoa.
And that then like defined my life for a year and a half. And then I said, oh, actually, I'm burnt out on this and this is way too much. And now I'm married and I own a house and I've got to leave. Which is like a practical reason to do so. But I still miss it every day.
Yeah, I get it.
It's weird to leave stuff behind. And then by doing that, it gave me time to focus on other stuff I wanted to do. And I very promptly started this podcast instead. But, you know.
But it's like, it's an element of choice. And it's something that you have more control over, which it feels like you were ready for. Like, you know, there's a distinct difference between being a part of like something and coming in to like an established thing as someone who's like, hey, I'm going to help you continue this established thing, and then saying like, I am ready to make a thing of my own. So it does feel like, you know, that was a certain graduation point for you.
Oh, for sure. That's true.
I think like, you know, that is in a lot of ways the hardest part is saying goodbye to an old project. Like when Sphere ended, it obviously was like, you know, something where both of us were really like, even Rachel, who'd just gotten like a call for like a dream job, was like, this is a huge bummer to like
this
have to
stinks. Yeah.
You know, but it's like, I don't know, like we're both comedians. We've both, you do a show with somebody who gets SNL or something. And you're like, oh, it's a bummer that I don't get to see my friend every week anymore. But also like my friend gets to,
my friend gets to do SNL. Yeah.
So like you're not really like, as you know, it's, you're bummed, but it's not like, you know, a grief necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, it's like sometimes you have to like say goodbye to the old thing to do the new thing. Like, you know, I think ultimately that was a point where I think like even if that had not happened, I think we both were at this like kind of inflection point with the game where the stuff we wanted was different, where I was like kind of noodling around in this more like story focused space. And it was like, it kind of came along at this perfect time where it's like I started doing the creative tech stuff and she started doing Command Zone. And then we like kind of landed in, you know, I don't think either of those things would have been as possible if we had been like, no, we can't give up on this old project or whatever.
Yeah,
you know,
we can't abandon the Command Zone. It's what's got this, not the Command Zone. We can't abandon the command sphere. It's what's gotten us all the way here.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's like at a certain point you have to be like, the first part of the rocket gets detached at some point, you know, it's just part of it. And so, yeah. And I think like it allowed me to do more of like the stuff that I got to do with Piebreak, which has been really fun. But like with any project, yeah, you have to think of your free time as like, as a resource. It's like magic. It's like life's a resource, baby. It's, you only have so many hours in a day. And that I think has been my biggest hurdle to hop over as a writer is when I, as a bona fide bad brain haver, where my executive function kind of tends to range from season to season.
Yep.
Yeah, it's, like the dark months of the year are not very productive for me. And then just like knowing how much time I have to actually dedicate to these things means I have to really think hard about what goes into those spaces. And so, inertia can be the devil sometimes, where you're just like, I've been doing this for so long. Why would I stop doing it? And it's like, well, because sometimes you stop doing a thing, and so you can start doing a different, better thing. So yeah, it can be really interesting to have those conversations with yourself, and how repeatedly, you sort of wind up getting rewarded, I think, for taking those leaps of faith. I'm sure, if you were still at Playing with Power, would this exist? Or thinking of the other things you've gotten to do, would you feel like you're in the driver's seat as much as you are now? Would you feel that way if you still had kept the old job? I'm sure you'd feel really stressed. That's a lot to do at once.
Yeah, it was always something that was really nice, but yeah, it's it wasn't my project, right? It was stuff I was helping out with, and I had a lot of ideas for, and some of those were implemented and some of them weren't, because that's how team projects go, especially when you're not the boss, right? And yeah, I think the transition into doing my own stuff has been really nice in its own way, because the Herald's Horn is not anything groundbreaking or whatever, but no one was making a show in the Magic space exactly like that. It's a type of show that exists out there in other niches of the world, and it was what I wanted to do. So I did it, and it's been really fun to do it. And if I was still Playing with Power or whatever, I wouldn't have time to do some of the other freelance work that I'm doing now, and all that kind of stuff too. And I wouldn't have time to hop on a 4-hour call every 2 weeks with Murph to talk about retro video games and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but even now, I am feeling the weight of how many creative projects I have started for myself, because I'm doing the Horn, and I'm doing a retro video games podcast, and I've started a Herald's Horn newsletter because I wanted to write a little bit about Magic the Gathering again, and I love having a newsletter. And I've been writing personal stuff again for the first time since college, and that's been great. Really stretching the old writing limbs to the best of my ability. But it all adds up, especially since actually all of it is just all right, Cal, this is the 4th time you need to have major creative output this week. It's due tomorrow. And my brain's no. But is there a project that you have chosen to leave behind that felt pretty heavy to put down, hard to put down? I guess Sphere maybe falls in that, but you were awesome.
Sphere falls in that.
You weren't forced per se, but
I wasn't forced. Once it became clear that Rachel wasn't going to be able to stay, I was so the thing that I've learned through doing Pie Break is that Magic players want their content to be only about Magic, and with Commander, Commander players want their content to be only about Commander.
Yeah.
And I was not prepared to, without my friend who reads every card and has an encyclopedic memory of cards and could talk about the really meat and potatoesy stuff while also being really funny and riffing. Rachel was so important in that regard that once she wasn't part of it, I was oh, this isn't the same thing anymore. It's not something where I could just pick up a new co-host and keep going, because she used to carry a whole lot of burden on the really card focused stuff, and I would be sitting there what if we did a dragon stepdad bracket, and it was that was kind of the balance between what the two of us did worked that way. And so when it was just me on my own, I was oh, this can't I could keep trying to do this, but I don't feel good bringing in a new host and setting them up to be compared to the old situation.
Rachel, yeah.
Yeah. And so it was that to me felt like a natural stopping point. So it didn't really feel as much like I was leaving that behind. I do think something I have had to do, and I don't know, this is maybe it's sort of a half scoop. I've definitely slowed down the amount of Magic content that I'm doing. And that is feeling like something that I have largely been moving towards after a while of thinking about it, because I think was talking a little bit about inertia earlier and how like inertia can be as much a hurt as it is a help. And I think I got so used to just like for 2 or 3 years, I had like a weekly Magic podcast, and that was what I did with my time. And it got us through the pandemic. Like the two of us were kept sane by doing that show.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it like kind of worked itself into just like, like, oh, I make magic content. That's what I do. But it wasn't like in 2019 when we started, like right before the pandemic, that wasn't the plan. It was like a little side thing that got way bigger. This thing. Yeah. Because we were inside and we were like, reading about cards is keeping me from thinking about the darkness or whatever. And so like now that we're getting to a point where we're like, obviously world's still a nightmare, but we're like relatively removed from like the lockdown years, and I can kind of like see a clearer path. I'm just like, oh, like the sort of stuff I want to make doesn't really have as much of a home here. And for a while over the summer, I was like, oh, well, it's just because I'm not pushing hard enough. Because that was with Sphere, it was like the harder we pushed, the better we did. And that was because we were making something that ultimately was in line with what people wanted. And with Pie Break, what I've kind of realized is like it kind of lives in the space of being like a once or twice monthly show, as opposed to I had put it weekly for a while and was like really busting my hump trying to get it out every week and to constantly find new guests and new topics. And it's just like I wasn't enjoying it as much anymore. And so it's like I've been scaling back more and more on a lot of it. Not for any like lost love with Magic. It's just like my relationship with the game has changed a lot.
I think that's one of like the real difficult things about making things now is that like there's actually no off ramp to making things anymore per se. I mean, there probably never really has been, but there's no real easy way to pivot or whatever, right? Like you were saying, like people, when you're in a niche, people really want to hear from you about that niche, and anything else, maybe they don't really care about it as much. Well, past the point, I think this is like something that people probably don't like to think about or admit or whatever, but I think you can kind of see it across almost any space where people have been making something for a very long time. Every one person only has so much to say about one thing, even if we're in a continually rapidly evolving landscape like the game of Magic the Gathering. You can only say the same things. You only have so much to say about Magic, or so many interesting new ways to interact with Magic in your own specific way or whatever past a point. And so that kind of like, I think that just like naturally brings not something like Pie Break or whatever, but even Command Sphere or whatever, kind of more naturally to an end, because you're just like, all right, we've been doing this for a while and not feeling it as much, and it's not as fun and interesting anymore, and maybe it's just running out of things to say.
Yeah, and I think like also there's the economy of it where it's just like it requires a lot of effort and regular human money. And so it's like with a show like Commander Sphere where it's just like, oh, we've been working on this for a long time, a ton of people like it, but it is a non-zero drain on our both finances and brain space, in addition to our regular jobs, especially for Rachel, who was like, when we would do an episode about like really gameplay focused stuff, like that has never been something that people who listen to that show wanted from me. They like wanted Rachel's take because like Rachel knows what fucking time it is, man. She is like, she knows this game inside and out. There's a reason she's become such a big voice of this format, is because she understands it and people clock that she understands it. And so like between each week she was going through, and it was like, in addition to me being like, so like, let's come up with like 10 stepdad dragons or whatever.
Yeah.
She
like,
would
so
also,
what if we farted?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I'd be doing goofs and then like she would, in addition to having goofs to bring to the table, also be doing all this gameplay stuff. And so it's like a full-time job is a way better use of that. And so it's like, I think sometimes that's something that you have to think about when you're making content, is just like, how much is it taking from you? And, I have some kind of like, I've reached a point where my beliefs are verging on crackpot when it comes to like the like economy of attention and like making art on the internet and like what these platforms are doing to us, like to a point where I'm like almost telling people actively that there's not much like, it's hard to fully explain, but I think in a lot of ways we are leaving our own joy on the table with some of this stuff. That like the ecosystem as it is set up is not sustainable for people. And I don't know like what it takes to be like a person with a Magic podcast now versus even 2019. Like I'm not trying to be some Magic boomer being like back in 07 or whatever, this was different. Like I'm saying like
back only 6 years ago.
Yeah, I am saying like fully even this same decade, even 2020, like it was a set it and forget it podcast at the start. We recorded, I put it on Libsyn, talked about it on Twitter, and it made its way around. Now Twitter's dead, but no one, Magic Twitter's like kind of torn between it and Blue Sky. You need an Instagram presence, you need a TikTok presence, and even then it's like, so for each episode, you're making an episode, you're making clips in 2 different sizes and like with different points or whatever. You're monitoring audiences across all these platforms, and it's like that's the day job that I do so that I can write. I do marketing stuff so that I can write. I didn't want to also do marketing stuff in my free time. So it's like, I have been trying to minimize how much I do on the internet because I don't think there is an off-ramp on it anymore. I think we are all, the great American export is consumers, baby. Like we're all just there to go online, watch things and buy products. And that's what these platforms have become all about. And insofar as you can help them, they will promote you. I think the future of art is smaller and less a part of our incomes. And I think that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of us, myself included, as someone who like, I don't want to be the guy being like, who like got to write a book because I had a Twitter account and like my whole career exists because there was briefly this social media to paid writing, pipeline. But it is closing. Like media and writing and creative jobs are fewer and further between. So like I think the biggest thing to think about if you're someone trying to start a project who's been sitting on a project for a while isn't, this isn't me saying don't do it. It's do it in a way that is sustainable. Do it in a way that you can afford, that you can feel comfortable with, that makes you feel good. Not like you're appealing to an algorithm or something like that. Like do it because you like it. And then like more than just the financial part of it, you need to be able to like spiritually be able to afford it. Don't tie your self-worth up in, it only got 10 views. It's like, well, maybe it only got 10 views, but maybe those 10 people were like, finally something good. Like a view count's not really, when platforms are built the way they're built, it's not really an indicator of quality so much as shareability.
And it is wild too, because like the view count is so crazy, man. Like one of my less performing recent episodes, which was like a weird bonus episode thing, it got 63 views through its like first 5 days or whatever. And I was like, oh brother, only 63 views, man. 63 people is a lot of people.
Yeah, I like
actually
getting any sort of views online means that you have more people who are aware of your existence than most people did for all of human history.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, how cooked are our brains that I see a YouTube video that 1,000 people watched and I'm like, that's the worst. Do you know how much a medieval peasant would have paid to have 1,000 people listen to him for 7 minutes?
Exactly.
Oh my God. He'd be like, okay, like I'll jump into a bunch of lava, but like 7 people will listen to me for 7 minutes beforehand.
Yeah,
incredible
exactly.
deal. But
yeah, exactly.
But part of what did it for me was like I put out like the series of YouTube videos I did. The one that did the worst was like my favorite one. I did this whole thing about Karn, who was like, if I have one thing to say about Magic, it's like to talk about Karn's story, and like digging in deeper was so much fun. And it just like did not have a place in the ecosystem because I wasn't talking about how the game's dying. I wasn't talking, like I wasn't telling you 10 upgrades you can make to this or that. Like it was just like, here is a sort of slow, thoughtful look at a character who I think oftentimes gets oversimplified when we talk about this game. And so it's like thinking about that and not letting yourself be ruled by that, by those view counts.
Yep, definitely. And back to the like shorts and stuff thing, man. That's the craziest change, actually. Like, even when I graduated college, which was not that long ago, even all the way back then, like, yeah, kind of like you said, the deal about starting a podcast or so many of these creative projects is just like, yeah, you make the thing and you put it out there. And if you build it, they will come. Is like the cope philosophy, I still have to believe in my brain because I believe that I'm making objectively decent things that surely there must be an audience for, right? I think that's what a creator has to tell themselves past that point. But I'm doing the whole thing like actively aware that my healthy for me spiritually approach of all of these projects where if I hate doing it 3 weeks in a row, I gotta pull the plug.
I mean,
yeah,
genuinely, like put that on a plaque. If I hate it 3 weeks in a row, pull the plug. Send that to every creator at 1 million views. That should be the guiding principle. If you take one thing away from this,
that's like the promise I pretty much had to make my wife when I started the Herald's Horn, because she had gotten the front row seat to be like burning out on everything. And she was like, "Are you sure you're ready to like jump into another major creative project?" I was like, "Let me tell you what." But part of that is that the major free marketing vehicle that exists for my form of content, which is short form content, I only make when I'm like really feeling it. I'm like, all right, I know there was a really good clip in the last episode. I put a time marker on the premiere timeline. I'm feeling inspired. I've got 45 minutes. Let's make this happen. So 2 shorts have been made for the Herald's Horn in the a year and 2 months that it has existed. Which for a podcast is not that great.
I did them for like 3 episodes of Pie Break, and they didn't immediately work. I've got such that brain where I'm like, oh, these weren't
3 weeks in a row. I quit.
Yeah, these weren't smash hits after 3 weeks. It's like, well, no, the algorithm doesn't even start promoting them until I've been doing them regularly for longer than that. Like, but it's like it wants daily food, the algorithm, and I'm just like, this is what I do to afford like, and some of this is that like, I come at this as somebody who is like, my dream was always to write books and screenplays, where it was like I wanted to write longer form projects. And the internet certainly does not reward that. You can't be like, hey, social media, look at my book. Like,
hey guys, check this out. I've been working on this for 4 years. It made me cry 15 times.
Yeah.
You can pre-order it from Macmillan for $26.
Yeah. And it's like, don't get me wrong, people will buy it. And some of those people who buy it, fewer than you think, will actually read it.
Look, let's not talk about how many unread books are in my house.
I have a whole second train of thought. Just like the weird book as a totem of like hope, where we just now like buy them to like just to hold them in our hand and be like, someone made this, and then we like put it away. I don't know what it says about what's happening to our brains.
Someone wrote this book. That's so cool.
It spooks me a little bit because I do it too. But it's like coming at this as somebody who, when the wolf stuff blew up years and years ago, I was like, finally someone will see that I can write and they will let me start writing books. And then I realized that all the platform wanted to let me do was more content, and that I could either be in the content loop forever or have a life where I sold fewer t-shirts and got to do more of the stuff that I wanted to do. And that was like a big turning point for me. I don't, remains to be seen if it was the right call financially, but it is better for my brain to make work and art. And if someone wants to, publish one of my books, awesome. If not, at least I'm writing, like at least
I have written a book, and I am happy that I have written a book.
Yeah. Like I feel better about the stuff that I make when I am not constantly thinking about the effect that it has on, some financial / economical concept of my career.
Yeah. I gotta figure that out. Dan.
You're 27. You just you're not activating for a whole day. You're activating tomorrow.
In one day, my brain,
as my old therapist would say.
And I'll wake up tomorrow and I'll message you on Discord. I'll be like, Dan, I figured it out.
When once you're 28 and you fully activated, your lobe's complete, I'll send you a bunch of back stretches you can do, and then alongside
those for the last few years already, my guy.
Oh yeah, my back blew out when I was 27 was the first time I had back, or 26 maybe, I don't know, but it was like I was in Ohio actually. I was in Ohio and threw my back out for the first time. They gave me the good pain meds.
I'm sure.
They really juiced me up. They gave me pain meds. They wrote Mountain Goat songs about.
Oh yeah,
literally dilaudid. I don't know what they were doing, but they took care of me. They got me home. But anyway, I do think it's one of those things where it's just like, it's about trial and error. And I think like it's about knowing how much time you have, how much energy you have, and then like what your threshold is for either failure, rejection, or just like the natural cycling of projects. Cause yeah, it's like there are going to come times where you're halfway through a thing and you're like, I just don't think this has the juice. And that's like part of your instinct, that's like something worth listening.
Mm-hmm. That's why I'm scared to pick up long-term projects, Dan. I'm about to embark on my top secret long-term Magic the Gathering project, which at this point, I don't know if I have time to do. Who knows if it'll be good.
The tough thing about really long-term projects, because I've been working on this thing now it started in October, and we're like kind of closing in, and it's like, there'll be one day where I'm like, this isn't what I thought it was. This does not
actually,
have it. This
is not good. Yeah.
And then I'll wake up the next day and be like, oh, it was great. I'm just hungry. Like I just hadn't had dinner yet. And so it's like kind of having to constantly relearn the ability to like know when to trust your instincts and when your instincts are just sort of like self-defeating little urges from within you being like, but if you don't work on the thing, no one can hate the thing. Isn't that nice?
What if we just didn't hate it at all?
Yeah, you can't hate a thing that doesn't exist, and then you're just a little unfulfilled. That's not so bad.
Do you know what would be fulfilling right now? Reading that book on your bookshelf instead of doing the work.
Or as we've like rewritten our brains, what really happens is it's like, what would be really fulfilling right now? If you bought a product on the internet.
You know what would be really fulfilling? Open up the Amazon app. You know what would be really fulfilling? Look at Instagram stories until you see an Instagram ad that you want to buy.
Post a product you bought recently from Amazon on Instagram and get some likes so that you can have a little bit of endorphins from that, and then you can get another endorphin buying a product.
You see, I don't do that with items from Amazon. I do that with my GameCube collection. Every time I'm feeling down about that a little bit, I just click, hey guys, check this out. And everyone's like, fuck.
I will say I'm a staunch defender of collections. This has been a recent thing for me. Like even before, like outside of Magic or whatever, which is like a collection with a function. I love functionless collections now. After my grandfather passed, my parents and my aunt they found this box that was full of bands. They just called them bands because it was just little figurines of guys in a band that he just collected. No reason awesome. Behind it. He just set them up, and he just like if he went to a place and there were 4 figurines of like frogs doing a 3-piece jazz combo,
he'd buy them.
And then he bought so many that when people went to other places and they were like, I saw 3 frogs doing one of them's conducting the other 2. They would be like, so I bought them for you. And there's something so sweet and human about that, about just like I gather my little objects. It feels more like an actual expression of just like, I like these are nice, as opposed to like my computer has rewired me so that I can only get joy when I buy a product. Like the GameCubes to me feel like a nice thing that you, Cal, have found interesting in the world that you are gathering.
I would agree. I that is how I feel about collecting. But then on the days when I haven't eaten enough, I'm like, man, collecting is just a different form of rampant consumerism we're lying to ourselves about. Well, Dan, I think this is the part where you tell me about all the new top secret creative projects that you have in the fire, and then we post them on the internet.
Oh, yeah. In terms of stuff I can actually talk about. I mean, the nice one is that with Aether Drift coming out, I actually have so much of like Wizard stuff is always under NDA, and so I never get to talk about it. But right now, all my stuff with Wizards is very public. The Aether Drift is out. I did creative text for it, or it's not out yet, but it's previewed. I've done some threads on Twitter and Blue Sky that show you which cards have my more like distinct fingerprint on them. Past that, I'm always hesitant to like, because the way the process works is like very collaborative, and so like I always try to pull like 5 or 10 that I feel like are like oh yeah, it's like almost 1-to-1 what I submitted, but past that it's like usually a little bit more like, oh, this person had the idea for the format and then I came up with this part. But yeah, so those are out there. Aether Drift exists and is in the world. My next creative text set after this is it's been publicly announced, I believe, the Strixhaven return from It's I forget when it's supposed to come out. They announced it at one of the big
2026.
Yeah, exactly. Forever from now. So yeah, it is. You will see that in 2026, or if the production schedule changes, maybe even later. So you got those in terms of the Magic world. I've been working on this book for ages. When does this come out?
When does this come out?
Yeah,
this comes out in 2 days, Dan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it won't be done by then. I was like, if it's like a month, maybe I'll be closer to being done. But no, we don't even have a publisher yet. And so the book might be done in a month or two, but the publisher stuff is longer behind. Thank you. Yeah, I've been cooking a little bit. As it turns out, when you're having a baby in June, you got to get anything major done before then, because I wanna be fully locked in for that. If anyone would like and subscribe to my child when they're born, please, everyone.
Your latest consumerism. You're consuming a baby.
I haven't had dinner, so I do feel comfortable saying that babies are ultimately just a form of consumerism.
I was like, oh man, I've got to do title for this podcast: Dan Sheehan on consumerism.
Just trying to get my baby's follower count high, prenatal as a gift to the baby.
Just making sure that they're well set up so that when they inevitably want to make content about Magic the Gathering,
I'm fast tracking this kid content creator track. I've got there. I'm going to make him the first double iPad baby. I've got 2 iPads. I'm going to kind of set them up as a folding thing.
Yep.
So they can be second screening from birth. I think that's going to be really good.
One will just be repeats of The Office, and one will be Subway Runner.
Yeah, if I can get Subway Runner on one and then The Office on another, and then you kind of window that, and then we get some maybe something political so that they're learning. Manosphere stuff or something like that. If I could really quickly radicalize my child.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah. Oh, playlist. My kid's going to be super into Rogan as a third or fourth screen thing. And then, I just want to see what type of guy that makes.
Dan, I do want to ask you one practical question.
Fire away.
If anyone was to be approaching a new creative project, is there any practical advice that you would give them to think about as they move in that direction?
Yeah, I would say my most practical advice, and the advice I try to use myself, is to think very carefully about sustainability first and foremost. Not in terms of the environment. I guess that's important too, but just in terms of what will allow you to do this for a while. If we're talking about internet projects, things like, you're making a Magic podcast, you're writing a book, you're, no matter what it is, it's going to take a lot of consistency to make it work. Whether you're writing 100,000 words of a novel project, or you're trying to put a podcast out every week, commit to something that you can do at a level you feel comfortable with. Because it's like anything else, where if you're I'm going to get ripped, I'm going to the gym and I'm going to do this huge crazy workout. 2 days later, your abs hurt too much to go again, and you never do it,
brother. Yeah.
And then I do have a little system I use if you're someone like me who has kind of paralysis when it comes to new projects and stuff like that, where you're sitting with 5 ideas and you're like, God, I wish I could do all of these. And it's called PUP. There's no other way around it. It's got a silly name. So the way PUP works is you have passion, urgency, and potential. Passion being a scale of 0 to 3 of how passionate you are personally about the project. Urgency being how much does this project need to exist? If you are writing something ultra topical, its urgency score would be really high. If it's I'm writing a joke about Donald Trump's, what he did today. Obviously, it's going to be old news by tomorrow, so your urgency score would be very high for that. Most things should have a lower urgency. And then potential is just what could this do for my life and career if it were to successfully be made. So, if those scores, you can kind of take all your projects, if you have 5 different ideas that you're looking at, you throw them through PUP, you give them 0 to 3 scores, and you just go based off the math, where it's this thing has 3 for potential, 3 for passion, 2 for urgency. seems like that's actually what I'm the most excited about. And so that is what I've done for a very long time. It was something I used way more when I was younger. Now I guess I've just kind of like learned to have fewer ideas and to write down the old ones and go with whichever one is like the most pertinent to my work. But back when it was like more amorphous and I like didn't have any idea of like which direction to go in, Pup was pretty helpful for that. But yeah, just find something you can do and do over and over again. And like, I think the practice around the things you do is as important as the things you make. Just making it a habit to actually dedicate your time to doing it as opposed to talking about it, thinking about it, etc.
Definitely. Actually do the thing rather than simply thinking about the thing, and the rest will be history.
And if you're just thinking about the thing, just like know that that's its role in your life, right? Where it's like, it's a daydream. You know, a daydream's great, but don't like torture yourself with daydreams being like, well, why haven't I built that flying car? It's like, well, you don't have, you know, the time or the money, and they're not real. They're called planes.
Well, Dan, thank you for having this conversation with me. We are classically running a little low on time, so I have 2 more questions. One of them is our classic. It'll be Patreon only. I am going to pick your brain about what you've been enjoying doing outside of Magic, your hobbies outside of Magic. I love to talk to people about that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, but we're going to talk about that for the patrons. If you're interested in that, check out the Patreon. But the final question, it's the same final question for everyone. Do you have anything else to leave our listeners with before we go, Dan?
Sure. If you want to find me, I am on Blue Sky at Dan Sheehan. If you want to read my book, it's called I Am Not a Wolf. It's available wherever they do book. Aether Drifts in stores. Strixhaven will be in 2026. That's the extent of my Magic stuff right now. Pie Break's out there. It's out there. It's not updating it as frequently as it once did, but it's still there. It's still fun. And that's about it. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Hell yeah. Well, Dan, thank you so much for stepping into the horn and chatting with me.
Great to be here.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you have feedback, would like to sponsor us, or would like to submit something to the Letters to the Editor segment, email me at editorial@heraldshorn.com. The show is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Cal Jones. The rest of the team is, of course, our co-hosts, Emma Partlow, Dan, better known as Moderately Anonymous MTG, and Lexi, better known as Black Girl Mage. We're having so much fun making this show. I hope you're enjoying listening to it. We'll see you next week.